Happy Sunday. It's lovely for you to join. Hello to everyone who has joined me for a video before, and welcome to those of you who are brand new today. My name's Bex, and in these videos I look at different topics or different parts of the Bible, ultimately so we can learn more about God. So before I get started, it'll be great to hear about your weeks. So why don't you just take a moment now and think, what is my favourite part of the week? What have you done this week that has been really, really good? Why don't you share now within your families what your favourite highlight of the week has been? My highlight of the week was ordering pizza last night, so it was a bit of a treat. This morning I'm going to be talking to you about a woman named Esther. Now Esther is an actual book in the Bible. It's a whole book. But we don't know who wrote it. The story of Esther was set 100 years after the Babylonian exile. This was when the Israelites were kicked out of their land. So many of the Jewish people moved to a place called Susa, and that was the capital of Persia. So the main people in our story is a lady named Esther. You can get your thumb out for Esther. Her cousin, Mordecai. Try saying that name, Mordecai. It's quite a tongue twister. Then we have the king, and we have his official, Haman. So these four people are the main characters in this book in the Bible. Now here's a little fun fact for you. God actually isn't mentioned in the book of Esther. Shock horror. I know. How can a book of the Bible not actually mention God? Actually, it's something brilliant. The book of Esther is an invitation to look out for all that God does. It's an invitation to look for God's actions. And they are everywhere. It forces you to see God's work and purpose. The book of Esther actually starts with the king having a banquet. Now, a banquet was like a huge party. Think loads of food, loads of drink, loads of exciting things. A bit like a wedding, you know, big banquet, something really exciting. Who's been to a wedding before? I have. I've had one. But that only lasted one day, okay? And lots of weddings only last one day, or in some cultures, it's over a few days. But actually, this banquet that the king was having lasted 180 days.
180 days?
Who would like a 180-day party? Now this banquet, this 180-day banquet was for all his important people, all the important men, members of the army, members of the officials. There were so many people. And they spent the time eating lots of food, drinking lots of wine, having lots of laughs. It was the place to be. And the reason the king was having this banquet was to show off. He was like, oh yes, I am the king. I'm the king. Look how much wealth I have. Look how much wonderful things. Look how much food I can feed you. This was just a party to celebrate how rich he was, how wealthy he was. And then after the 180-day banquet, he decided to have another one. This time lasting 7 days, so not as much, but still, that's a long party. Now this time it was for all the people of the palace. It was for the greatest people, the most important people, and also the poor people, the servants. Everyone was invited. Now in those days, the kings and the queens had different quarters. So some of the palace belonged to the king, and some of the palace belonged to the queen. And ultimately, the king did rule it all. So while the king was having this 7-day banquet with all the men, all the important people and the not so important people, the queen, she decided to have one too. Now Queen Vashti, she had her party for all the women in the palace, for those who were really important and those who weren't so important. And the palace was beautifully decorated. Had these gorgeous long white curtains tied with glorious rich cord. It had marble floors and solid gold cups and gold and silver sofas. Like, this was high class. Think about the Queen's Palace, but think of it 100 times better. Like, it was luxurious. It was hot and beautiful. And on the 7th day, the king had definitely done too much partying. He had definitely eaten too much food and had definitely drunk too much wine. But he wanted his wife, Queen Vashti, to come over to the men's banquet to show off her beauty. So he sent a servant to go get her. And when the servant asked her, she was like, I'm not coming. I don't want to. That did not make the king happy. He was fuming. His rage was like a burning fire. He was so mad. Why wouldn't the queen do what he had told her? So he decided to get his experts of the law, to come round and give him some advice. He said to them, right, listen, I asked the queen to do something and she's not doing it. What do I do? So the experts flicked through their scrolls, they looked through the different laws and procedures, and then they came up with something. The experts said that not only had the queen disobeyed the king, but she had disobeyed all the men in the empire. They told the king that other women will see how she's spoken to you, and they'll start saying no to their husbands too. And then we'll have uproar, because the men won't be in control, the women will be saying no, and then the men will get really angry. And they were like, nope, we cannot be having that, king. So the king put in writing that it was law that all women were to obey their husbands, to do what they were told, and he decided to get rid of Queen Vashti. He didn't want her as his wife anymore. He didn't want to see her ever again. But the king decided that he needed a new queen. So some of the people in the palace suggested to him, why don't you do a beauty pageant? You know, get the nice looking women in here, those that haven't been married before, and you can see what they're like and then decide who's the best looking one, and she can become your new queen. The king liked this idea and so said, right, people of the palace, I want you to send an order round, tell all the women if they're beautiful, not been married before, all like perfect, come on, come to this beauty pageant and I'll pick the best one to be my queen. Now, if you remember at the beginning, I said about a man named Mordecai. He had the funny name, and he was a cousin of Esther. So Esther's parents actually were not around, so Mordecai looked after Esther as if she was his daughter. Esther was a beautiful woman. She had a beautiful face, a beautiful figure. She was hot. She was beautiful. Now Mordecai and Esther were Jewish, as mentioned earlier. They loved God, they worshipped and they served God. And Mordecai said to her, why don't you enter this pageant, don't tell anyone you're Jewish, just enter it, let's see how you get on. So Esther did just that. She was put in the care of a man named Haggai, a man that the king had ordered to look after all the women who were going to be living in the queen's, like the women's quarter of the palace. And very early on, Haggai took a liking to Esther. He liked her, he liked how she was and how she behaved, and also how she looked. So he quickly gave her all the beauty treatments, put her into a place where she could have all the ointments, where she could clean herself, make sure her hair was looking lovely, do her makeup. He pushed her quickly so that she would get ready for the king. He also ordered that she had special food and special drink. And alongside some other women, Esther got put into the top special first class bit of the women's side of the palace as well. And every day Mordecai didn't forget about Esther. He went up to the palace courtyard to see if he could see her. He wanted to find out if she was safe and okay. Now some of you old ones may have been to a spa, or your mums or other women in your life may go and get their nails done, or get their hair done, or go and have some treatments. Now, usually this can take a few hours or a day, but no. These women having all these treatments in the palace, they were not allowed to meet the king unless they had had 12 months. That's a whole year of beauty treatments. They needed to be at their best in order to meet the king. So Esther spent the year beautifying, smelling lovely, washing. She was all ready for the king, and it was her chance to meet him. And Esther only took in with her what Haggai had told her. Everyone that saw Esther and met Esther, they just liked her. She was lovely. And the king, he really liked Esther too. In fact, he chose Esther to be his queen. So the king put a crown upon her head and declared her queen of the kingdom and threw a big banquet in celebration. Now you may want to pause the video here and spend time making a crown. So here is one that I lovingly prepared earlier. As you can see, it's got little gems on. Mine is just some wrapping paper that I found in my house. It's got like little sequiny gems. But why don't you spend the time, pause the video now and make yourself a crown to remember when Esther became the queen. You could stick things on it, you could colour things on it, make it your own. Now you also may want to take this opportunity, whether you've made a crown or not, to have a bit of a beauty pageant yourself. Why don't you find some nice glamorous clothes from your wardrobe and do a little fashion show for your family? Why don't you get on that nice dress that you've forgotten about or that smart suit and have a little strut up and down? You can do this to celebrate your beauty. And then why don't you join me back for this video wearing your crowns? As I mentioned earlier, God hasn't been mentioned, and he won't be mentioned in Esther. But it seems like God is doing something, that God has a purpose for Esther being queen. It's important to remember here that Esther had still obeyed Mordecai and had not told anyone that she was Jewish. Now one day, Mordecai was sitting at the palace gate when he saw two soldiers, two guards that were guarding the palace, and he overheard their conversation. They had been really mad at the king for some reason or other, and they were plotting to kill him. When Mordecai heard this, he ran and he told Esther, "Esther, the guards are planning to kill the king." So Esther went to the king and told him. So the king ordered an investigation to find out what was really going on. And the findings showed that they in fact were planning to kill him. So the king forgot about Mordecai for telling him and sent the officers off to be killed themselves. Now the king needed someone to take over, to be protecting the palace, and so he employed a man named Haman. Now Haman was an officer but was given a new rank. He was the elite. He was the top dog. Under the king, of course, but he was the one to go to. He was the main official man. And Haman, when he was given this authority and this power, it went straight to his head. He wanted people, whenever they saw him at the gate, to bow down and to kneel and bow down. And so people did it. When they saw him, they kneel and bow down. But Mordecai wouldn't. Mordecai loved God. Mordecai would bow down to no other man but God. So the gods tried making him. They were like, "Oi, Mordecai, you're breaking the rules. Get on your knees, all right, and bow down to Haman." But Mordecai wouldn't. So Haman, he got mad. He decided that he didn't just want to destroy Mordecai, but all his people, all the Jews. He wanted them all to die. Haman was an enemy of the Jews. So Haman went to the king. He went and told the king that there was a group of people not obeying his laws, not obeying his orders. They're scattered around, they're all around us. Their customs are different and they're just not obeying the law. And Haman said that he shouldn't be letting them live in his kingdom. The king agreed. "The people are yours. Do what you want with them." the king gave his special ring, his signet ring, to Haman and said, "Go on, you write the letters out. If it has my seal and is written from me, then it can't ever be broken. What it says has to happen." So these letters from the king got sent out all across the empire, all across the land. They stated the king's order was to destroy all the Jews, to kill them all. It doesn't matter if they're old or they're young, or a woman or a child, they need to be destroyed. And in the letter, 13th day of the 12th month, this is to happen. So what did the king do? Well, he had another banquet. Him and Haman sat around drinking wine, having lots of yummy food. They celebrated that this was a plan, that they were going to stop anyone from trying to be better than the king and not following his rules. Mordecai was so upset. He ripped his clothes in anger. He put on horrible scratchy cloth and covered himself in ash to show how upset he was. And he walked around the streets sobbing and crying out to God. And other Jews saw him, and when they heard the news as well, they done the same thing. They took off their nice clothes and they put on the horrible scratchy clothes, you know, the ones I'm talking about, and they covered themselves in ash and they just cried. They cried. And Esther heard what had happened, and she was so upset. She started crying. Oh, her heart broke. So she sent out clothes to Mordecai. She sent him some nice clothes, but he refused to wear them. Instead, he gathered up all the information about the agreement that Haman and the king had made, the letter that had said to destroy all the Jews, and he gave it to one of Esther's servants to give to her. When Esther saw this, Mordecai also told the servant to tell Esther that she needs to go and tell the king to not destroy her people. He wanted her to beg and plead with the king. And Esther passed a message back to Mordecai, basically saying that unless the king has ordered to see her, then she can't enter. It is against the law for anyone to go and see the king unless they're asked. And she hadn't been asked for 30 days. The only rule around this was if you went and the king put out his gold staff to you, and you could take it, and that means that he accepts you coming into his place without asking. And Esther was scared. She didn't know what to do. She didn't want to die. She didn't want Mordecai to die. And she wanted to see the king, but she was scared of going in case he decided to kill her. So Mordecai sent another message back. Esther, just because you live in a palace, it doesn't mean that you will escape, even if you don't tell anyone you're Jewish and you stay quiet. If you don't do anything, someone else will come along and they will save the Jews. But you and your family are going to die. Maybe, Esther, you have been placed as queen for such a time as this. This may be the reason that you're the queen. So Esther sent another message back. Mordecai, you tell all the other Jews, okay, you gather them all up, and all of you do not eat or drink anything for 3 days. And myself and my servants, we won't eat or drink anything for 3 days. So that's basically fasting. They fasted for 3 days and 3 nights. Then, she said, I will go to the king, even if it's against the law. And if I die, I die. So, 3 days later, just as she said, Esther got all robed up. She put on beautiful clothes, done all her hair and makeup, and decided to go and see the king. And she went and she stood in the inner courtyard, and she could see the king in his hall. He was sitting on his throne. And when he saw Esther, he was so happy, and he handed his staff out to her, and she grabbed it. He was so pleased to see her, and he asked her, what is it that you want, my queen? And Esther said, I want you and Haman to come to a banquet. So he ordered his servant, quick, go get Haman. We're going to a banquet with Esther. So both the men went, and there was lovely food, there was drink. It was glorious. Esther had prepared a wonderful feast. And again, the king said, Esther, my queen, what is it that you want? And Esther said, well, I would like you and Haman to come back tomorrow for another banquet, and then I'll ask you for what I want. I'll answer your question. And again, Haman and the king had had such a beautiful time. They had drunk lots, they'd eaten lots, probably drunk too much as well. Terrible. And Haman left all the banquet happy. He was happy leaving. He was in a good mood. He was shouting out to his officers and everything until he saw Mordecai. Mordecai the Jew. He wasn't happy to see Mordecai. But he decided not to say anything. He bottled up that anger and decided to go home and tell his wife and his mates. And when Haman got home, he got his wife and he got his mates and he said, oi, I'm going to have to do something. I've had a good day. I've had a nice banquet. I've been chilling with the king and with Esther. And then I see Mordecai. Mordecai the Jew. And until the day that I stop seeing Mordecai, I will not be properly happy. So the wife and his mate said, you know what? If it's making you this sad, why don't you kill Mordecai? Why don't you get people to build a nice big platform and kill him in the morning? Haman liked this idea. Yep, I'm going to do just that. So he went off to the palace to see the king to tell him that he was going to kill Mordecai. That same night, the king was so tired, but he couldn't sleep. He was awake. Whatever he tried, he still couldn't get to sleep. Have any of you ever had that? It's horrible, isn't it? So what he done was he got one of his servants to read him the daily court reading. So I wonder whether any of you, when you can't sleep, sometimes get mum or dad or your parent or your carer to read a book to you. And that's kind of what he did. He asked him to read the record, what happened in the palace. So the servant was reading through the things, and it came up to when Mordecai told the king about the two officers who was planning to kill him. And the king thought, did I ever do anything to thank Mordecai for basically saving my life? Servant said no. Just then, the king heard someone. Who's that? It was Haman. It was Haman coming to tell him that he was going to kill Mordecai. But instead, the king went to him first and said, Haman, I've got a question. What should be done to a man who the king wants to honour? Haman was getting excited. In his head, he was like, well, the king must want to honour me. Who else is there? There's no one else. I'm his favourite person ever. Well, bar Esther, his wife. But me, I'm his favourite man. He probably wants to honour me. So Haman came out with this. He said, this is what you could do for the man you want to honour. Get the servants to bring a nice robe that the king's worn, and get a horse, and the horse should have a crown, one of the royal crowns, and the horse should be one that the king has ridden as well. And then let that robe and let the horse be given to the man who the king wants to honour. Let the servants put on the nice robe and help him onto the horse, and then take him around the city, take him round the land. And as they are leading him, announce, this is what is done to the man the king very much wants to honour. The king liked this idea. So he said, Haman. And Haman's all excited. It's going to be me, it's going to be me. Haman, go get Mordecai. I want to honour him. Could you imagine? Haman's there thinking it's him that the king wants to honour. And it's Mordecai. Mordecai the Jew he wants to kill. The king shouted after him, and Haman, don't leave anything out. Make sure you do everything that you've just said. Haman weren't happy. But Haman obeyed the king. He went and got Mordecai and robed him in the robe that the king had worn and put him on the horse that the king had rode, and shouted out to the people, declaring that Mordecai was the man that the king wanted to honour. And after this he went home. He was sulking, he was so angry. He went home and he said to his wife and his mates, "Oh, you never guess what the king's done to me today." Oh, he was fuming. After a bit of grumbling, Haman and the king went to Esther, just as they said, and they joined her for a banquet. And whilst they were eating and drinking and enjoying themselves, the king said to Esther again, "Oh, my love, what is it that you want from me?" And Esther said, "I hope I please you. If it pleases you, let me live, and let my people live. This is what I want." The Jews have been sold to be destroyed. The king was horrified. "Who done this? Who said this?" "Haman," Esther replied. Well, the king was furious. He decided to storm right out that room. He did not want to see Haman. He was so angry, he did not control himself. He was burning, he was raging. Haman got on his hands and knees. "Oh, Queen Esther, please! Please don't kill me. Please let me live. Oh, Esther, please!" He was begging for his life. He was begging Queen Esther. And then the king decided to burst in again. "I'm ordering Haman to be put to death. Use that nice podium thing that he built to kill Mordecai and kill him on it instead." The king gave all the titles and the power and responsibility that Haman had to Esther. Now Mordecai came to see the king, and Esther told the king how they were related. So the king had taken the ring off of Haman that he gave him and instead gave it to Mordecai. Esther put Mordecai in charge of everything that Haman was. This was exciting, this was wonderful, but there was still a problem. There was an official documentation signed by the king saying that all the Jews were going to be destroyed on the 13th day of the 12th month. Esther began crying at the king's feet, begging, "Please, please save the Jewish people. Please save my people." So they came up with an idea. They were to write a new letter in the king's name and with the king's signet and everything, basically saying that on that day, Jews can defend themselves. They have the right to defend themselves from their enemies, and they can take and keep their enemies' possessions. They had the right to destroy where their enemies are, or people who attack them. And this letter, in it said that this would take place on the same day that Jews were supposed to be killed by people, by their enemies. Instead, the Jews can protect themselves, and that they can look after themselves, and instead fight back and take what the enemy has tried to steal. And the king told his servants, "Quick, get this message out. Don't rush around. Quick, send it everywhere. Tell everyone this is a new thing." And the Jews were so happy. They were so happy with this news. They weren't going to be slaughtered. They weren't going to be destroyed. So they decided to feast and celebrate this new letter from the king. Now the 13th day of the 12th month came, and the Jews, they came all together and they defeated every single one of their enemies. But they decided not to take any of their belongings. The day after, they had a joyful feast, a big celebration, celebrating their freedom. And Mordecai said that they should do this every year. On the 13th and 14th day of the 12th month, they should remember what has happened and they should celebrate it. It was a time where Jews defeated their enemies and where sadness was overturned into joy. And the king had made Mordecai a great man, and he also became an important figure in the Jewish community. They respected him because he loved his people and he stood up for them. Now, going back to the point where I made earlier about God not being mentioned, like his name is not mentioned. Actually, we saw God all through that story. We saw the things and the people that God had put in place so that his will be done. When God seems like he's absent and he isn't there, does it mean that he's abandoned his promises? No. God always keeps his promises, just as we looked at in Noah last week. God protected and provided for his people. And as followers of Jesus, as friends of Jesus, we need to be willing to trust God, even when we don't have the answers and we can't see how we're going to get out of situations. Now, I'm going to encourage you now to take some time chilling and relaxing and reflecting over that story, reflecting over what happened, about the decisions that Mordecai and Esther made, ultimately to glorify God. And during this time, why don't you do some acts of self-care? Now, during this time, as we've been stuck inside, you may not be looking after yourself as well as you should. Maybe some of you need to be cleaning those teethy pegs. Who's out of routine with your teeth brushing? Eyes on you. Some of you may need to spend a bit of time brushing your hair, or you may want to do your nails or put a face mask on, or just do things to help you feel nice. You may want to have a big hot bubble bath and get into clean PJs. Do things that help look after yourself. And during this time, while we're looking after our bodies that God gave us, why don't we continue to pray and put our trust in him? That even though we're going through a difficult time, even though we don't have an end, we don't know when it's going to be over, we can trust in God, that God is looking after us, that God is protecting us, and that God always loves us. Why don't we pray? Heavenly Father, thank you that even when we can't see you in our situations, we can know and trust that you are always there. Thank you for the story of Esther. Thank you that it reminds us of this, that it shows us that you always have a plan. Lord, I ask that you would bless all the children and their families and all the adults and everyone else who's watching. Lord, may this week they be able to trust in you more. I pray that they would take time to look after themselves and to appreciate the wonderful body that you have given them. I pray that they get stuck into knowing you more. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed the story of Esther and you've been left with some thoughts and things to go away with. I'll be back next week and I look forward to seeing you all then. Stay safe and stay happy. Bye.